Welcome back, everyone. We are reading The Hobbit. We are on part 16. Let's begin. Tonight, the Lord of the Eagles was filled with curiosity to know what was afoot. So he summoned many of the other eagles to him, and they flew away from the mountains, and slowly circling ever round and round, they came down, down towards the ring of the wolves and the meeting place of the goblins. A very good thing, too. Dreadful things had been going on down there. The wolves that had caught fire and fled into the forest had set it alight in several places. It was high summer, and on the eastern side of the mountains there had been little rain for some time. Yellowing bracken, fallen branches, deep-piled pine needles, and here and there dead trees were soon in flames. All around the clearing of the wargs fire was leaping, but the wolf guards did not leave the trees. Maddened and angry they were, leaping and howling round the trunks and cursing the dwarves in their horrible language, with their tongues hanging out and their eyes shining as red and fierce as the flames. Then suddenly the goblins came running up and yelling. They thought a battle with the woodmen was going on, but they soon learned what had really happened. Some of them actually sat down and laughed. Others waved their spears and clashed their shafts against their shields. Goblins are not afraid of fire, and soon they had a plan which seemed to them most amusing. Some got all the wolves together in a pack. Some stacked fern and brushwood around the tree trunks. Others rushed around and stamped and beat and beat and stamped until nearly all the flames were put out. But they did not put out the fire nearest to the trees, where the dwarves were. That fire they fed with leaves and dead branches and bracken. Soon they had a ring of smoke and flame all around the dwarves, a ring from which they kept spreading outwards, but it closed slowly in, till the fire was licking the fuel piled under the trees. Smoke was in Bilbo's eyes. He could feel the heat of the flames, and through the reek he could see the goblins dancing round and round in the circle, like people round a midsummer bonfire. Outside the ring of dancing warriors with spears and axes stood the wolves at a respectful distance. Watching and waiting, he could hear the goblins beginning a horrible song. 15 birds in 5 fir trees, their feathers were fanned in a fiery breeze. But funny little birds, they had no wings. Oh, what shall we do with the funny little things? Roast 'em alive or stew 'em in a pot, fry them and boil them and eat them hot. Then they stopped and shouted, Fly away, little birds, fly away if you can. Come down, little birds, or you will get roasted in your nests. Sing, sing, little birds, why don't you sing? Go away, little boys, shouted Gandalf in answer. It isn't bird nesting time. Also naughty little boys that play with fire get punished. He said it to make them angry, and to show them that he was not frightened of them, though of course he was, wizard though he was. But they took no notice and kept on singing. Burn, burn, tree and fern, shrivel and scorch a sizzling torch to light the night for our delight. Yah-hey! Bake and roast 'em, fry and toast 'em, till beards blaze and eyes glaze, till hair smells and skin crack, fat melt and bones black, in cinders lie beneath the sky. So dwarves shall die and light the night for our delight. Yah-hey! Yah-ha-re-hey! Yah-ho! And it was with the Yah-ho the flames under Gandalf's tree lit. In a moment it spread to the others. The bark caught fire, the lower branches cracked. Then Gandalf climbed to the top of his tree. Then sudden splendor flashed from his wand like lightning as he got ready to spring down like a thunderbolt. But he never leapt. Just at that moment, the Lord of the Eagles swept down from above, seizing him in his talons, and he was gone. There was a howl of anger and surprise from the goblins. Loud cried the Lord of the Eagles, to whom Gandalf had now spoken. Back swept the great bird that were with him, and down they came like huge black shadows. The wolves yammered and gnashed their teeth. The goblins yelled and stamped with rage, and flung their heavy spears in the air with vain. Over them swooped the eagles. The dark rush of their beating wings smote them to the floor or drove them far away. Their talons tore at goblin faces. Other birds flew to the treetops and seized the dwarves too, who were scrambling up as far as they dared go. Poor Bilbo was very nearly left behind again. He just managed to catch hold of Dory's legs, and Dory bore off last of all, and up they went together above the tumult and burning. Bilbo swinging in the air and his arms nearly breaking. Now far below, the goblins and the wolves were scattering far and wide in the woods. A few eagles were still circling and sweeping above the battleground. The flames about the trees sprang suddenly up above the highest branches. There went up in a crackling fire. There was a sudden fury of sparks and smoke. Bilbo had only escaped just in time. Soon the light of the burning was faint below, a red twinkle on the black floor, and they were high up in the sky, rising all the time in strong, sweeping circles. Bilbo never forgot that flight. Clinging on to Dory's ankle, he moaned, "My arms, my arms!" But Dory groaned, "My poor legs, my poor legs!" At the best of times, heights made Bilbo giddy. He used to turn queer if he looked over the edge of a quite little cliff, and he never liked ladders, let alone trees, never had escaped wolves before. So you can quite imagine how his head swam now as he looked down beneath his dangling toes and saw the dark land opening wide underneath him, touched here and there with the light of the moon on a hillside, rock or stream in the plains. The pale peaks of the mountains were coming nearer, moonlit spikes of rock sticking out from black shadows. Summer or not, it seemed very cold. Then he imagined what would happen if he did not hold on. He felt sick. The flight ended only just in time for him, just before his arms gave way. He loosened Dory's ankles with a gasp and fell onto the rough platform of the Eagle's Ire. There he lay without speaking, and his thoughts were a mixture of surprise at being saved from the fire and fear lest he fall off that narrow place into the deep shadows on either side. He was feeling very queer indeed, and with his head by his side, time after the dreadful adventures of the last 3 days, with nothing to eat, and he found himself saying aloud, "Now I know what a piece of bacon feels like when it's suddenly picked up by the pan on a fork and put back on the shelf." "No, you don't," he heard Dory answering, "because the bacon knows it will get back in the pan sooner or later, and it has to be hoped that we shan't. Also, eagles aren't forks." "Oh, no, not a bit like storks. Forks, I mean," said Bilbo, sitting up, looking anxiously at the eagles who was perched close by. He wondered what other nonsense he had been saying, and if the eagles would think it rude. You ought not to be rude to an eagle when you are the only size of a hobbit and you are up in his ire at night. The eagle only sharpened his beak on a stone and trimmed his feathers and took no notice. Soon another eagle flew up. "The Lord of the Eagles bids you to bring your prisoners to the great shelf," he cried, and was off again. The others seized Dory in his claws and flew away with him, and in the night leaving Bilbo all alone. He had just strength to wonder what the messenger meant by prisoners, and began to think of being torn up for supper like a rabbit when his own turn came. The eagle came back and seized him in the talons by the back of the coat, and he swooped off. This time he flew only a short way. Very soon Bilbo was laid down trembling with fear on a wide shelf of rock on the mountain side. There was no path down save by flying, and no path off it except for jumping off the precipice. There he found all the others sitting with their backs to the mountain wall. The Lord of the Eagles was there, and he was speaking to Gandalf. It seemed that Bilbo was not going to be eaten after all. The wizard and the Eagle Lord appeared to know one another slightly, and to even be on friendly terms. As a matter of fact, Gandalf, who had been in the mountains, had once rendered a service to the eagles and healed their lord from an arrow wound. So you see, prisoners had only meant prisoners rescued from the goblins only, not captives of the eagles. As Bilbo listened to the talk of Gandalf, he realized that they were going to escape, really and truly, from the dreadful mountains. He was discussing plans with the great eagle for carrying the dwarves and himself and Bilbo away and setting them down on their journey across the plains below. The Lord of the Eagles would not take them anywhere near men live. "They would shoot us with their great bows of yew," he said, "for they would think we were after their sheep, and at other times they would be right. No, we are glad to cheat the goblins of their sport, and glad to repay our thanks to you, but we will not risk ourselves for dwarves in the southern plains." "Very well," said Gandalf. "Take us where and as far as you will. We are deeply obliged to you. But in the meantime, we are famished with hunger." "I am very nearly dead of it," said Bilbo in a weak little voice that nobody heard. "That perhaps can be remedied," said the Lord of the Eagles. Later on you might have seen a bright fire on the shelf of rock, and the figure of dwarves round it cooking and making a fine roasting smell. The eagles had brought up dry boughs for fuel, and they had brought rabbits, hares, and small sheep. The dwarves managed all the preparations. Bilbo was too weak to help, and anyway he was not much good at skinning rabbits or cutting up meat, being used to have it delivered by the butcher all ready to cook. Gandalf, too, was lying down and doing his part for setting the fire going, since Owen and Glóin had lost their tinder boxes. Dwarves have never taken to matches, even yet. So ended the adventures of the Misty Mountains. Soon Bilbo's stomach was feeling full and comfortable again, and he felt he could really sleep contentedly, though really he would have liked a loaf and a butter better than bits of meat toasted on sticks. Yet he slept curled up on a hard rock more soundly than he had ever done on a feather bed in his own little hole at home. But all night he dreamed of his own little house, and wandered in his sleep for all his different rooms, looking for something that he could not find or remember what it looked like. And if you'll like to hear the next part, where they pass the mountains, we'll cover that in part 17. Thank you for watching Role Play Riot.